Are we good? All right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to Woodbury PTO meeting. My name is Brooke Ribriesco. I am PTO co-president with Sarah Schiavone. She could not be here with us tonight like many others. So we are recording this. I hope you guys can hear me on the recording. But so if any of your neighbors or friends were unable to attend tonight, please let them know that this recording will be available on our PTO webpage, which is shakerpto.org/Woodbury PTO. There's a lot of great PTO meetings that we've had this year. We showcased our music department. We had a great conversation with our school psychologist about brain development and technology and social media. So check out those meetings if you haven't seen them already. We are going to get to some PTO business. I know everybody's here to talk to Dr. Glasner, our superintendent, but we do have a few PTO things on the agenda. In order to save paper, because we all love trees, I only printed off one copy per table. So please share if needed. So the agenda is on there. We also have the PTO budget. That is the most recent PTO budget with the January reconciled bank statement. So it's kind of what we've spent so far, what our goals are for the rest of the year. So that's on the table. And also our PTO roster roles and positions. So I am going to have Jen and Christina come on up. They are the incoming PTO presidents for next year. So our current VPs to talk to you about the roster.
We really rehearsed this.
No, we did not.
Who's going to say what? I'm Jen Marchwackers.
I'm Christina Gerber.
And we're the co-VPs for this year. So we'll be moving up to the president role next year. And we're recruiting for folks for next year. So we're looking for anybody who wants to continue on with their role, certainly is welcome to do so. But more importantly, we have some key positions that their children are moving on to the middle school. So we'll want to make sure that we get some good folks in there. So our communications positions, we have 2 communications positions that we're looking for help with. So stuff like posting things on the website, getting things ready for the newsletter, little blurbs and stuff. It's a lot on your own time, which is nice. You can do it from the comfort of your own home. And then we're also looking for some folks to help us run the We Love Woodbury fundraiser. That's our one fundraiser every year that we do. It's fairly straightforward. Things are already really planned out and ready to go. It's just a matter of getting trained on that and then being that contact person to help things move along. Anything else we need to say?
Well said.
Okay.
No, a lot. I guess those are 2 pretty big roles. Like a lot is done through social media with the communications role. So really, that's an important role. But like you said, not very time consuming. You don't have to go a lot of places. Not a lot of time constraints. Just important. And then the Woodbury fundraiser is a pretty big event for us every year. So we're going to carry that on.
And that's how we get to the budget. So
yeah.
All right. But if you have any questions, let us know.
Thanks. Awesome, thank you. And I just want to add too, Woodbury is a really special place. So volunteering with the PTO is a great way to get involved and to meet new people. And we would really love for our PTO board to reflect all of the great neighborhoods that we have in Shaker. So everybody is welcome to join the board, and we hope that you find something in the roster that you feel inspired to do. Okay, so with that, I'm going to go to the treasurer's report. We have 2 treasurers, assistant treasurer. Davine is right here. So she is looking for a buddy to help her follow the money next year. So if you don't mind tracking
dual control. Yeah.
So talk to Davine or I if you're interested in helping with the financial aspects. I just want to very quickly point out that you can look at the budget, shakerpto.org/Woodbury PTO. That was passed in September. The reconciled statement is on there. What I want to do tonight, and we did ask our board this a few days ago, is we want to increase the money for the spring fling. We have 2 stated goals for this year. The first was to really promote our communications, make sure all of our parents feel connected to correct information so that they have access to everything going on at Woodbury. The other was to build opportunities of shared experiences and just fun moments of community building. So the spring fling is coming up in April. Eric says yes. So we want to make that really fun for our little ones. And so we are asking to increase the Spring Fling budget by $500. And since we are all members of the PTO, can I get somebody to make a motion? All right, so just for the record, we've got, okay, great. Christina did the first, Beth Leslie did the second. Okay, so raise your hand if you're okay with passing $500 to increase. We have an overwhelming majority. If you would like to raise your hand against it, or if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. Okay, great, so it's passed. Let the record show, great. Communications report, I would like to invite Lori Young up, our volunteer who's been in charge of our social media presence.
Hi, I'm Lori Young, and I've worked on communication for Woodbury PTO along with Abby Botnick. Abby's been doing tons of Facebook updates, and we've done lots of Canva images. Our main way of communicating with everyone is through the Facebook page, our website that Brooke said, shakerpto.org/WoodburyPTO. And on the website, you'll find all the agendas, recordings. There are also opportunities to sign up to volunteer for different positions, and that is also linked on the website. A couple upcoming things that we'll need volunteers for are the Woodbury skate events for 5th and 6th grade in March, and also the book fair. So check the website for those opportunities. And I want to stress the importance of looking at the e-news that comes from the Shaker School District on Sunday nights. It's sent out at 7 p.m. And the school puts together information for families, and PTO puts together information for families. So you're going to get one email, 7 p.m. every Sunday night, and you want to link to your different schools. I have a middle school student, and I have a Woodbury student. So I need to click on both of those links, and that is where I find almost all of the information that I need. And then Abby and I make an effort to put everything we find that has to do with PTO, both on Facebook and on the website. And then we supplement what's there with e-blast. Brooke puts together a monthly update for everyone, and that goes directly to everyone's inbox. The difference is with the Sunday night email, we're only getting about 200 families, separate opens on the Sunday night email. So that means a lot of people are missing that information, and it's really important that you look at it if you can. And then the monthly emails get to about 500 families, which is much, much better. But if anyone has any ideas about ways we can communicate better or more clearly, please let us know. We're open to any suggestions. Like Brooke said, one of our main goals this year is just making sure everyone has the information that they need. Anything else? It was great. Okay, thanks.
So huge thanks to Lori Young and Abby Botnick. They've been incredible volunteers with communications. So I just always want to say a huge thank you to them. I also want to give a very public shout out to Tracy Williams. She is new to the Woodbury administrative team this year, and she's been a great partner with us, sending out the monthly e-blast, or everybody got a text message today saying to come. So just a huge shout out to Tracy Williams for that. Okay. Last on the PTO agenda updates here is our outreach. So, okay, there's 3 things I want to put on your calendar. The middle school PTO meeting. If people are interested in learning about middle school or high school, it's not too early to start learning about that. There's great pathways that's offered in the district. And so the middle school wants to invite all Woodbury families to come to their PTO meeting on Thursday, February 23rd. Sarah Schiavone and I had a great preview of what Dr. Moore's presentation will be, and I have a high school student, and I still learned a lot that day. So put that on your calendar if you can. Woodbury Skates is going to be a super fun opportunity at Thornton Park. Whether you're a new beginner or you're on the hockey team, whatever, it's going to be great for everybody of all skill levels, and it's going to be paid for thanks to our We Love Woodbury fundraiser. And then we have the book fair coming up. Anne Marie, we've got a volunteer. Are you still?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, there she is. Okay.
Sure.
Says, are we still there? Yes, we are still there. Hi, everyone. I'm Anne-Marie Faltisco. My partner, Katie O'Brien, let's see, how do you have it listed here? Because I call her Katie O'Brien. But, let's see, where is she? Katie O'Brien Hawkins. Okay. We're both doing the book fair again this year. So that's going to take place on Monday, March 13th to Thursday, March 16th. We're going to do it for 4 days this year. There'll be more information coming out shortly. We might do something special on the Friday prior, but we'll keep you posted. We will need volunteers. So every single day we'll have a morning and afternoon shift. So we'll need 1 to 2 volunteers for that. We'll have a sign up genius that'll be available on Facebook and through the newsletters. So you'll probably get an email from both like the team emails and the school and the PTO. Something that's important that will make it a little bit easier for us this year is if people set up an e-wallet prior to the book fair that gives your student money to spend at the book fair. This year per Scholastics, they said that they're charging tax. So just kind of account for that. So if you're looking at the flyer and you see the book price, just make sure you add like a couple extra dollars just so that your student has enough to pay for their books. And once again, this school year, we're going to make sure that every single student goes home with a book. So last year, if a student came in and didn't have money to spend at the book fair, we made sure that every student had the opportunity to shop for a book. We gave them like a $20 limit to basically shop for whatever they wanted to take home. So that's about it. Does anyone have any questions? Sure.
Does it have to be the e-wallet, or can you send cash? Or
You can
check, or-
absolutely send cash. It's just a lot easier because last year we found that there was the communication wasn't as good. And so students would come to shop with their class and they wouldn't have their money. So this year we're really striving for better communication. But, sometimes the student might forget, oh, hey, tomorrow's the day I'm shopping. So it's just a lot easier. We'll make sure that that information comes out at least a week prior to give you enough lead time to set that all up. Yes.
Now with the e-wallet, I had a separate situation. I had
Yes.
twins.
I remember.
Two separate accounts. And one twin had extra fun with the money.
So in that scenario, if we have a situation of twins in the same household, or, students that are in the same, maybe a 5th and a 6th grader, I think what would probably be best is to send Katie and me an email to say, hey, heads up, I have 2 students. Please make sure it's divided equally, and we'll make sure we write a note. Oh, yes.
I'm sorry, did you say that every student is gonna have up to $20 to spend, or that's for those that did not have the money?
The $20, the limit of $20 were for students that were not able to purchase a book if they didn't come to school with a book. We want to make sure every student has a book in their hand to take home. Yes.
It is not all in the budget.
Oh, so actually the money, so not worrying about the budget. We actually have $6,000 available in Scholastic dollars to use. So we have plenty enough money. We know that Mr. Kaminsky is going to be purchasing some books for the language and literature teachers. So we're looking for ways to spend that money. Anyone else? All right, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Anne-Marie. Everybody loves the book fair.
Yes.
And I know it's a big undertaking, so thank you and Katie for helping with that. Okay, PTO updates are done. Eric, I'm going to kick it over to you, and then Dr. Glasner, do you have any updates?
I mean, all of my updates were taken at some point. I'm looking down this list. Just a really brief, I'm, looking forward to these skating events, which I thought were Woodbury regulars, but I guess this is our first venture into skating events. So I think we have a lot of kids who are going to want to attend. I think what's unique about this and the PTO volunteers who are helping are, some of them are going to want to go without their parents and some of them are going to want to go with their parents. And so we're figuring out how to staff that appropriately so that we've got, a little bit of freedom in there. Particularly, I think a lot of our 6th graders will want to do that on their own. So looking forward to that. For sixth grade families, be on the lookout very, very soon for a camp update. So we are committed to figuring out making a sixth grade camp happen. We're just in the final stages with the camp on some things with them related to the contract and just sort of the timeframes in which we are, what our time at camp and kind of what their expectations are and what we can provide. And so we are hoping to get like a full on flyer out to families with clarity on the costs and when, and we're hoping to do that when we know when specific teams are going. Like we have the blocks and the weeks. We don't know when specific teams are going in those weeks. And so I know I've had a number of families reach out and ask specifically about something they're going to be out of town and they want to know. And so we're hopefully going to try to have that within the next 2 weeks out to sixth grade families. Rhonda?
When you say camp, you talking about like overnight?
Yes. Yes. It's not, yes, in a cabin. And we are hoping that we can get like all of our kids, we know, especially over the last few years, like we've had a lot of our stuff has been close to home and in our houses. And so we're working, the camp has been wonderful in working with us on, last year was the first year. For many, many years, it was at Camp Wise, for those of you who know the Camp Wise, not too far from here in Burton, Ohio. And then last year we went to, oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking on the name of it right now, but it's a Boy Scout camp. Yes, it is. Camp, thank you, Dr. Glasner. Yeah, it's a Boy Scout camp a little further afield. And so last year was their first experience with Woodbury camp. And so Amy Brodsky, who's our IB coordinator, who's been at Woodbury for about 20 years with a little respite when she left. And so she's been instrumental in kind of helping us get this scheduled for the school year. So I would imagine within the next couple of weeks, we'll have a full update out to families. Okay.
I'm sorry, can I just add too, and I want
Yeah,
to say this to the camera. PTO used to fund scholarships for sixth grade campers. We've taken that out of our budget, and the Shaker Schools Foundation is generously taking that on. So that's not part of our PTO budget anymore. It's part of the Shaker Schools Foundation. So a quick plug for their red and white annual fundraiser.
So absolutely. And on that front, those on top of thank you for the book fair, we're looking forward to it and other things of that nature. I'll turn it over to Dr. Glasner.
Thank you, everyone. It's great to be here. I will try to do this sitting down, but if you need me to stand up or talk louder, please let me know. I was wondering before I start, if we do just a quick whip around and you could say your names. I know I got to meet a bunch of you when we started, but I'd love to just make sure I get to know you a little bit now and more over the course of our conversation. We'll just go by table quickly. That would be fantastic.
Well, I'm at the solo table. My name is Kevin E. Gilmore, and my son is Caden Larry. And this is our first year here.
Fantastic.
Claudia Castina. My daughter is Eloise Castina. She's in fifth grade.
Andrew Herring, and my daughter is Adelaide Herring. She's in fifth grade.
Anne-Marie Faltisco. I have a student in sixth grade, Xavier Faltisco.
Rhonda Wright, I have Gabrielle Rindell, absent 6.
Beryl Herring, I also have Adelaide.
Merrick Welsh, we have a 5th grader, Melanie here, 2nd grader, Boulevard, and then 2 little ones that are coming in later.
Hi, I'm Heather Weinhardt. I have a freshman in college and a sophomore in high school, and I'm in home education.
Beth Gillespie, I have a 6th grader, Margot here, and then I have one that went through, Ellie, and one on the way.
Emily Hoffman. I have a 5th grader, Molly here, and a 2nd grader, Ryan.
I'm Sultan. I have twins in 6th grade here and a senior in high school. I'm Laura Young. I have a 6th grader here and an 8th grader at the middle school.
Chris Ramito, I've got a son, Ben, in 5th grade, and a daughter, Maggie, in 1st.
Teresa Morrow. I have a 5th grader, Wyatt, and 4th grader over at Fernway.
Amber Malik. I have a 6th grader, Teresa Malik, and 3 at Fernway and 1.
Sabrina Scott, I have a 6th grader at here and 2 grown sons.
Krista Jigon, I have a 6th grader here and a 4th grader at Onway.
Chris Gerber, I have a 5th grader here at a Gerber and one in the high school.
Taylor Schwackers, I have a 5th grader here and a 9th grader.
In Woodbury, I've got a 7th and a 5th grader. Bennett is at Woodbury and plays at middle school.
Rachel Martin, I have a 2nd grader at Boulevard, a 5th grader here, and a 7th grader at school.
Devine Spencer-Holiday, I have a 5th grader at Woodbury, 2nd grader at Onaway, and one more.
Ariane Thomas, 6th grade AP.
Howard Sheen, over 300 5th graders.
Eric Corbin, I'm the principal here. I have a 4th grader and kindergartner at Fernway.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Brooke and Sarah, and the rest of the PTO officers for inviting me. Also, thank you, Heather, for this evening. Much appreciated. What I thought I'd do, I thought I would just go over some updates around topics that I know are near and dear to everybody's hearts, and then just really open the floor for questions and conversation. I know there was a forum to ask questions in advance, so hopefully I'll get to touch on some of those topics and questions now, but of course, anything that I don't touch on, please feel free to ask or bring up. First of all, I just want to start by reflecting a little bit on where we are now as compared to where we were a year ago, and really give a lot of kudos to the staff, faculty, administrators, PTO for all the work that they've done to really help come out of the pandemic, help Woodbury come out of the pandemic, strengthen some of the things that we know needed strengthening coming out of last year, just the structures that are in place here, the advisory and homeroom structures, the social emotional learning structures, the Ubuntu program and message, is really important. And also, I know I've been at Woodbury a number of times over the course of this year, and it is always a pleasure to walk in and see the great learning and relationship building that is happening here in this building. So I just want to acknowledge and thank all of the staff, faculty, administrators, and others who've really helped do a lot of hard work to get us to this point this year. I know a question on a lot of folks' minds has to do around detracking and de-leveling. So I want to just spend a little bit of time, first of all, defining what that is, and then talk a little bit about how it's going and where we see it going in the future. First of all, just in terms of defining what it is, detracking and de-leveling are 2 different things. I know they're often morphed into one. When we talk about detracking, we're talking really from a grade level perspective around students' experiences, most visibly from 4th to 8th grade. And the idea that our goal is for students to be in integrated, heterogeneous learning environments during those grade years. Math is a good example. I'll talk about what math used to look like and what math looks like now. It used to be that we had different tracks. And students were identified for those tracks relatively early on, usually around 4th grade. And those tracks took place starting in 5th grade. Students were in either advanced tracks or what we called grade level tracks. The advanced track ended up taking Algebra 1 in 8th grade and then proceeding from there. And the grade level track took what we called 8th grade math and then would take Algebra 1 in 9th grade. When we moved to D-track, we merged those different tracks and we really leveled up. And so all students now are being prepared to take Algebra 1 in 8th grade. So Algebra for All is another way of thinking about that, especially when it comes to mathematics. We know, and the reason why we implemented this detracking model for a couple of reasons. One, we have seen historically in Shaker Heights that those tracks, this wasn't necessarily intentional, but that those tracks were often largely, almost entirely segregated by race. The advanced track was almost entirely white. The grade level track was almost entirely Black. And we believe that it's important that our students experience heterogeneous, integrated, diverse settings, like they do, thank you for turning the fan off, like they do at younger grades leading up to Woodbury. So we have experience in creating integrated settings, supporting differentiated learners, and we wanted to continue that through 8th grade. We also felt that it was important to level up, especially when it comes to mathematics, because we know how important Algebra 1 is. It's called a gateway course. It leads to many more opportunities in high school in terms of the kinds of course pathways students can take. It also generally is aligned with other kinds of positive life outcomes for students when they take Algebra 1 in 8th grade. So we thought that that was important. Now, of course, it's not quite as easy to describe this in other subject areas. Math is very sequential, so that's why I focused on that. But we aim for similar kinds of opportunities and experiences for students in other grade levels as well, or sorry, in other subject areas as well, in terms of really exposing and supporting all students with an enriched, robust, rigorous, challenging, and supportive curriculum. Detracking is a little bit different than de-leveling. And I know there has been some confusion around this question. I often, in the past year or two, I would get questions like, does this mean we don't have any more AP courses at the high school level? Or does this mean that we don't have the IB diploma program at the high school level? No, that is not the case. We still offer those advanced course pathways to our students. In fact, one reason why we're committed to detracking at the earlier grade levels is because we want to see more of our students enter those advanced course pathways later on in their school careers, particularly students from underrepresented groups or groups that have not historically, groups that have been marginalized or groups that haven't had a high amount of enrollment in those advanced course pathways. An adjacent conversation is related to giftedness. And I get questions around that as well. And we've made some changes over the past couple of years in how we identify and serve gifted students. I won't go too far back in terms of a history lesson here, but over the past couple of years, we have made a concerted, strategic, and intentional effort to be more consistent, more coherent, and more universal in how we identify gifted students. We want to make sure that we are assessing all students for giftedness. In the course of that process, we also realized that we need to do a better job of serving gifted students. And so just this year, for the first time, we have a gifted support or intervention structure in place that includes a district-wide gifted services coordinator, as well as gifted intervention specialists that help out at our different buildings. Students who are identified as being gifted are placed in gifted clusters within classrooms. That does not mean that the whole classroom is comprised of students who are identified as gifted. It means, though, that any one gifted child in a classroom also has other gifted identified peers in the classroom. I was talking about this with Mr. Foreman earlier today. Just to give you a sense, we have about 1/3 of students here at Woodbury have been identified as gifted based on the different assessments that we provide. Our goal is to provide gifted services in the classroom setting for a number of reasons. We know that it's important for students to get those gifted services as much as possible in the general education setting, because that's where they have access to the general education teacher as well as other peers in the classroom. We also know that what's good for gifted students is generally what's good for all students. The idea of an inquiry-based, concept-based curriculum, the idea that they're working on difficult and complex problems and working in groups and teams. Those are things that are good for all students, and we want all students to have access to those kinds of supports and services in the classroom. This mirrors other kinds of supports and enrichment opportunities we have at other levels in our school district. So, for example, we have literacy intervention specialists at earlier grade levels. For the most part, those literacy intervention specialists are pushing into classrooms. They may be working with a specific group of students, but also modeling curriculum and instructional strategies for all students and for the teacher. We have IB enrichment teachers at younger grade levels. Same thing. They are largely pushing into classrooms and providing those kinds of supports, services, challenging these robust curriculum for a group of students, and also modeling and trying to expand the capacity to reach as many students as possible. So how is it going? This year, I'm happy to say that I think we've made great strides in the work that we're doing in creating diverse learning environments where students are being successful, where they're being supported, and where they're being challenged. This has been a learning process, and we've put a lot of effort and resources behind professional learning and supports for our faculty, staff, administrators, and others. And I just want to take a moment just to acknowledge the incredibly hard work that our staff and faculty, administrators, and others have done to make this possible. It's pretty exciting. We are literally reimagining what education looks like, what education should look like, how we are preparing our students for the modern world. We're doing that here in Shaker, and I know there are other districts in this country that are doing it. I like to think that we're both ahead of the game, learning from other districts, and also able to show some successes. Math is a great example where we've really seen some great strides over the past couple of years in how we create diverse, heterogeneous, integrated, and successful and excellent learning environments. There are some data points that we work on monitoring. I'll start by talking about some quantitative data points. We do look at academic achievement data, and I'm happy to say that we're starting to see students come back to pre-pandemic levels of achievement and growth, which is pretty exciting because we know that there were, the past couple of years, we saw a lot of learning losses or gaps in learning. We look at math and reading data to see how our students are doing. We are seeing a lot of good, what we call growth in student learning. Think about, for example, with math. So students may come in at a certain level. We want to make sure that they are growing in the classrooms they're at and that they're in, and we're seeing positive growth trends in our math data. We also see that we have room to grow. Some of the same disparities that we saw in tracked settings and pre-pandemic, we continue to experience some of those disparities, and we're working to address them. We are seeing that students who are gifted, high-achieving students, continue to do as well, if not better, than they were doing in pre-pandemic settings, which is a positive. We're seeing that they're still getting the challenge, the support that they need to continue to grow, and of course, we want to see them grow more. There are some data points from a quantitative perspective that is going to take some time for us to continue to monitor and learn more about. One example of that is enrollment in higher level advanced course pathways when students get to high school. So just to think about fifth graders right now who are all in math courses that prepare them for Algebra 1, what we'd like to see when these fifth graders are 10th graders or 11th graders, that we have a higher number of students going into AP courses and IB diploma program courses. Obviously, that's going to take a few years for us to get there. So there are some data points that we know are going to take a little bit longer for us to continue to measure. And we know that this is really the first, quote unquote, normal year that we've experienced under D-track setting, and that a lot of this are things that we're continuing to learn, improve, and strengthen. There are also qualitative data points that we're looking at. So for example, we administer a school culture and climate survey called the Panorama Survey. We want to see students talking about the kinds of expectations that their teachers, that's part of the questions. What expectations do teachers have for students? Are they high expectations? Are they supporting those high expectations with supports and services in the classroom? Do students feel a sense of belonging? Do they see themselves reflected in the curriculum and in the instructional strategies? Those are data points that we're looking at. I want to share just a quick anecdote about my own experience getting to see classrooms in action. One of these is an anecdote some of you may have heard before that took place in this building pre-pandemic when we still had tracked classes. I came with a couple of colleagues to visit some classes here, and we came to visit a grade level, I don't remember whether it was an English or a math class. It was almost entirely made up of Black students. I think there was one or two white students in the class. One of my colleagues asked one of the Black students in the class, "Where are all the white students?" And the student, I think it was a fifth grader, said, "Oh, the white students, they're all enriched." And that was really kind of a punch to the gut for me, because what I learned from that relatively brief exchange is that we are sending explicit and implicit messages to our students when we create these kinds of learning environments. The student did not say, "Oh, white students, they're in the advanced grade level class or they're in the enriched level course." He said white students are enriched. So we are sending messages about who has access to this kind of curriculum, about what value we're placing on students or what they may experience in their own worlds. I'm going to contrast that with an experience I had just, I think it was a couple of weeks ago. I visited an 8th grade math class. Diverse classroom. It looked like Shaker. Students, when I walked in the door, were working in small groups. I could not tell just from walking in the door who was a more advanced student or who was a student who needed more support. And while I was there, the small group activity ended, and the teacher started inviting students up to the front of the class to help facilitate and lead the classroom conversation. She invited one student up, a Black boy, and while he was helping facilitate the conversation, she got a phone call. And so she had to step out for a minute. And so he took on the class. And let me tell you, he rocked it. It was amazing. I mean, he was the teacher in the classroom. And really my only question was, when is he going to come back so we can hire him as a teacher after college? What message are we sending to students in this classroom? Here we have a classroom where not just Black students see a Black boy taking a leading role, being an expert in the subject area. White students see that as well and are learning to work with people who are different from them, whether that's expertise, background, racial demographic. These are skills that we know are going to support students well beyond their school careers here in Shaker Heights. I point those anecdotes out only because there's information that quantitative data can tell us, survey data can tell us, and there's information that we're learning just by getting to see and experience these classrooms in action. Where are we headed? We know that it's important to continue to provide intensive professional learning support for our faculty and staff as they continue to learn how to best support and differentiate for students in diverse settings. We're lucky that we have a lot of that expertise in-house with our instructional coaches, IB coordinators, literacy intervention specialists, and others. And we are also able to and have provided opportunities either from external support or to external supports. We are continuing to review, revise, and strengthen our curriculum. So as many of you may be aware, we recently adopted a new math curriculum for grades K through 5 and a new math curriculum for grades 5 through Algebra 1. We did that because it is a curriculum that is specifically designed, both of those curriculum are specifically designed to prepare students for Algebra 1 and provide differentiated resources embedded in the curriculum so that students have access to what we sometimes call low floor and high ceiling activities within the same curriculum, so that all students have entry points, access points, supports, and challenges within the curriculum. We also are learning and looking to see how we can continue to innovate. And I want to highlight two different things that we're working on. First of all, at our high school level, we're part of a pilot program, a statewide pilot program to innovate in mathematics instruction, providing students with a new way of learning mathematics. Right now, it's focused specifically on Algebra 2. We think that the kinds of learnings that we're taking from that kind of pilot program, we will expand to other courses as well. I also want to shout out in-house our Innovative Center for Personalized Learning, the IC. It has the word innovative in its title, and that's not an accident. In a lot of ways, the IC represents the most pure form of a D-tracked or D-leveled course environment, where students really have the opportunity to pursue individualized passions, pursuits, interests, and get the support that they need. It's pretty unique. We also, since we've been running the IC in this way over the past couple of years, we're starting to see that there are opportunities for us to learn from ourselves and take some learnings from the IC and expand it to our more traditional learning environments. So that's pretty exciting. So that's just a quick rundown of detracking, de-leveling. I didn't focus as much on what that means. De-leveling really is at the high school level. Really means we've just consolidated some course levels. So I know we used to have, for example, 5 course levels in science, biology, I think in 9th grade. That's a lot of course levels. And when we looked into it further, we saw that some of those levels, the students were working towards the same standards, often had very similar assessments. And we wanted to consolidate some of those levels again, with the goal of creating heterogeneous and diverse learning environments, but we do know that having different levels at the high school level usually makes sense. And again, I want to be clear that those course pathways, those advanced course pathways, and other pathways like College Credit Plus, career technical education, and others are still open to students, and we encourage our students to engage in them. Two more quick things. I want to talk about facilities. I know that's top of everybody's mind, especially sitting in this building. I'll give a quick rundown of where we are and where we're going. We have been having many conversations around developing a long-term facilities plan. I'll summarize where we are right now, the plan that we are exploring, and I'll talk a little bit about our time frame. Right now, what we are planning for, and what we're doing more research, so nothing yet is set in stone, but we're doing more research on this kind of plan. I'll go from bottom to top. Number one, we want to expand our pre-K program, or really as many students as we can. Right now, we serve about 85 students at Onaway. We're looking to open a new pre-K program site in the Ludlow School building. We're still working on dotting the I's and crossing the T's and figuring out what that means, but our goal is to be able to serve more students in pre-K. We know that a high-quality pre-K program really has many benefits for students well beyond their pre-K years. At the elementary level, we are planning to have all of our 5th grade students move down to the elementary level. So our elementary buildings will now be K-5 elementary buildings. All of our elementary buildings would also go through a renovation process similar to Fernway. So at least to the Fernway level. Not the fire, post-fire Fernway. We would have a 6 through 8 middle years building that would be located on this site. That would be a combination of a renovated building plus an addition. We're still doing more analysis around this, but we believe that we can maintain the facade of Woodbury, the historical core, and then add on to the building in order to be able to accommodate that extra grade level. And then the high school 9 through 12 building, we are looking to plan for a new high school building. That would be located on this campus area. We're still doing more analyses and estimates, but our goal is to try to be able to build a new high school while students remain in the old high school so that we don't disrupt their learning, and then they would transfer over to the new high school once it is built. At this point, we are currently planning for, and we're looking into this more, but we're currently planning for this to be done with one bond issue, not in different segments. That's the official term, segmenting. That doesn't mean that everything will happen, that all this construction renovation will happen the same day, the same time, et cetera. It still will have to be phased out or sequenced. Our goal right now is looking at one bond issue to be able to try to address all of these buildings at once. In terms of the timeline, we still have a number of other board meetings coming up over the next couple of months to continue to develop these plans and to continue to refine and plan out more cost estimates and information. We have to let the state know informally what our plan is by about the beginning of April. The Board of Education has to vote on this plan by the end of May, and our goal is to be on the ballot with a bond issue in November. If you have more questions about that, I'm happy to answer later, but those are just some highlights. Last, I want to mention, I know one of the questions I got was, what are my goals for the district? I want to be clear about this. We have a district strategic plan that really helps drive the work that we do together here in this district. That strategic plan includes goals related specifically around continuing to make sure that we have an inclusive and excellent curriculum and instruction. There's a large focus on goals related to diversity, equity, and inclusion, advancing diversity, equity, inclusion, making sure, for example, that we continue to recruit, hire, retain, and advance Black teachers and other underrepresented groups. There is a goal that is specifically focused around business and operations and making sure that we operate smoothly and in ways that support our students' needs. And there's goals related to professional learning. So I don't want to, kind of punt on this question, but my goals are the district's goals. And that is work that we've all done together and will continue to do together as we look forward to the future. I know I've been doing a lot of talking. I'm happy to stop talking. Thank you very much for listening. I'm happy to answer questions. Mr. Foreman, if there's something I missed that you want to also bring up, by all means.
That was quite thorough. No, I'm happy to facilitate the questions if helpful.
Thank you.
I have a lot of anxiety being in here right now. My heart is really beating out of my chest. I'm also really sad that it's not more Black moms here or Black dads. And I can almost understand why, because we kind of get sick of coming to meetings where it feels like church when you're there. And then when you leave, you have to go back to your regular life. And sometimes a lot of these meetings feel like that. I do want to say a lot, but I also want to focus on some positives. My son came from university schools. He was the only Black boy in his class. He has a ton of trauma around being the only Black boy in his class. And as his mother, I do too. So I'm often questioning myself, like, is this a trauma response? Or is this something that is really happening in real time? And am I experiencing this as a Black woman, as a Black mother? I strategically signed up for Rachel Wixie to sub, just so that I can kind of keep an eye on the performance and the vibes that I get as a mother. By trade, I'm a social worker. And with that, I have my own trauma from entering this district in the 10th grade as a former foster kid. So that's the sidebar, right? Because I'm very transparent. I feel like transparency is currency. And so the positive is on the very first day, it was amazing. It was just like welcoming. My daughter was running all around. I didn't feel like, oh my God, I need to get her. It was different. My first day at US, it was, oh wow, look at their hair for my son and my daughter from the teacher that my son will have. Here, my daughter was just running around. It was this relaxed vibration. In fact, people was like running to her and like, oh my God, hey. That came from like the assistant principal, and it came from moms that didn't look like me. So I was like, right? I was like activated, like this is great. Every day I'm asking my son, like, how's it going? How's it going? He's like, this is great, this is great. I get an email from Miss McGinty that turns into a phone call that tells me like, oh my God, I just love having your son. I'm like, oh, she doesn't look like me. This is great. This is, I love it. So much so that I'm like, can I show Kaden this email? And she's like, yeah, like I'd love to have them, right? Wasn't my son's experience at US. The barriers didn't come from students, they came from his teacher. And then me being a mom and trying to advocate for him and making sure I have the proper diction and worrying about what I was wearing, what wig and all this other BS. When the reality is it was just a lack of cultural competency, a lack of cultural empathy, and they felt like they were doing me a favor because I had a partial scholarship, right? So it's like, you should shut up and appreciate this. Okay. So being in that vibe and having my son here, again, I'm constantly checking myself, and I'm in therapy. Is this a trauma response, or is this really happening in real time? And it's the same for Kaden, right? Because if Kaden never cries, that means he's telling the truth. He's an urchin for time. He is so much more mature than me for time that I'm like, dude, relax, okay? So there's a situation that happened. Oh, wait, no, I want to talk more about the positives. The welcoming, great. Miss McGinty, love her, yes. The math that you brought up, I can attest that he was an A student prior to going to US in math, had challenges with the teacher, so they couldn't connect. And so he couldn't learn math. He's having some barriers here, but he tells me today, right-handed guy, wrong hand. He's like, my teacher is really helping me. She's helping me get it, Mom. I think I got it. I'm getting these fractions down. Yes. Right? He's activated about math. He's falling back in love with it. I'm like, okay, this is cool. Those are positives. So because he's an urchin for time, and he's a kid, and he's a boy, right? If you see something funny in the hallway, you're going to laugh. I've been subbing on and off strategically for 14 years because it makes you a better mom. You get a chance to see what's happening in real time in the classroom. Kids are literally their authentic selves, and there's nothing that we send out the door until it comes to principals, right? So with that being said, he had a situation where he's in the hallway, he laughs at something. I'm paraphrasing the story. And the teacher, I guess she gets upset, and she tells him, you're sassing me. Diction is very important culturally. So sassing to me is like when you watch a slave movie and you're like, you're sassing me, boy. It's a thing, right? That is a trigger. He didn't process it as a trigger, but I did. His triggers were, she told him that this situation could be on camera. We could call home. And he's an urchin for time. So he's like, okay, yeah, cool, whatever. But can I get back to class because the bell is about to ring? That's what he was fixated on. When he tells me the story, my brain is back to US, like, oh boy. And it wipes out everything good that's happened here, right? Because that one word, right? The assassin. In the school's defense, when I talk to the assistant principal, she vibes with me. She understands. I feel back heightened, like, whoo, this is great. She processes where I'm coming from, and I'm back in that vibration, like, okay, on top of him saying that math. I'm like, yeah, I made a good decision. Or a shaker. Oh, where's my shaker hoodie, right? And so when it's time to come to these meetings as a Black mother, it's like, do I tell the full story? Will my son become a target? Should I report this teacher? And what does that look like for the rest of the school year? That's too much, because I know other moms aren't feeling that. They're not thinking that, and they're operating on a frequency. Now, because diction is so important and we don't even realize what we're saying, one of the things that you said was you called the Black boy a boy. And then you said the white student. The white boy wasn't a student. And because it's recorded, you could double back and listen to it. It's very little things that trigger everything. And I'm processing why aren't we moving forward in this? Because we've all been raised differently, right? And we're trying to like do better as much as we can for what we've been inherited, like what we've learned, right? And so I really want to help the district as much as I can with cultural competency and cultural empathy in a way that I'm not like the go-to Black mom or the go-to Black professional, but in a way that we are communicating effectively. And even if we disagree, that there's a level of respect where I feel comfortable, because I shouldn't have to worry when I'm making that phone call, all the things that my son can endure for advocating for him. But then to some degree, this isn't your fight, because I had so many fights at US. So I'm trying to come in with a clean slate, emotionally competent within myself, but still I'm so tired of advocating for this little Black boy. Because what I've learned in the 14 years of subbing strategically is that we take the heart and souls out of Black boys for education as early as kindergarten. Because we have teachers who are not moms yet, who are white women who haven't navigated how to comfortably talk to Black moms in a way that we feel like we're on the same team. And then we're suspending them for childlike behaviors because we want the Black boys to sit down and be quiet and get Ritalin. So yeah, I want to see what side of the fence I could like be on, where I'm feeling like I do feel respected, so I can't say that, but that I'm helping drive forward, right? And then the other piece that has absolutely no bearing on this is I'm very fixated on kids who are in foster care. And that's how I grew up. I went to Shaker for the very first time. It was the only time I was able to see Shakers from being a foster kid. It was an extreme culture shock because I never saw so many people who looked different and understood class and representation in that dynamic. But 54% of those kids who experience foster care from a national number, they will not get a high school diploma. So I also want to help you with that. So that was a lot, and I'm not trying to put you on blast because I know that you meant well, but it's just an example. It's just how culturally, I can't talk for all the other Black moms. We assimilate different. That's another thing. Black is not Black. It's like Black blue, Black brown. Our assimilation is completely different. So I hear things completely different from these other moms. I don't even know if all of them is shaking their heads. I haven't turned, but I feel like I see one. I just want us to get it right? Because we're gonna die. They have so much more life ahead of them, and we have to teach them how to get this right? That's what okay, I'm done.
Thank you so much for sharing your story. You know, I acknowledge that there are things that I'm still learning, of course. I do want to, first of all, I want to get your contact information because I love to stay in touch both about the broader issues raised and around how we can best support foster kids.
Yeah.
we are doing work around cultural competency, cultural awareness. Specifically, I know you highlighted one specific thing I said, and we agree that that is where often both relationships can be made or broken, where diversity, equity, and inclusion can be made or broken. In our education lingo, we talk about it as discretionary spaces. These are the moments that happen almost unnoticed in classrooms, in the hallway. And we've spent quite a bit of time examining those spaces, those little moments that have big impact on our students, on our families, with our teachers. It's work that we still have to do, but I'm thankful that you brought it up. And it's also, thank you for leading with some of the positive feedback. That is helpful, but I do hope we'll be able to connect and stay in touch after this.
You got it. Oh, wow. Does no one want to say anything? Don't do this to me. Someone get her think of something. All right.
So I thought you were so candid and so raw in your sharing and so brave, right? I feel differently because I didn't hear that, but to your point, we grew up differently. Like, we're Black, but I'm Jamaican, and I did so that did, like, the sass, because I call people sassy, but I'm like, oh, I do that. I didn't know it could be interpreted as such. And you mentioned the boy thing, and I got a text message from I'm a 42-year-old business owner, and I got a text message from someone that's trying to tell me something, and they said, "Hey, girl," it's still sitting unanswered, because I'm like, I'm gonna wait to see how I want to respond to that, so it's just sitting there. So anyway, so brave. I can't wait to connect. Welcome. But my son has been through, like, since kindergarten through here, right? So I'll tell how I feel, and I don't know that you'll feel that way, but I'll tell you, like, when I call, like, I'll make a phone call, be like, "Hey, this is Ari's mom," and I get a "Hey, Davine," and you'll get that. Mm-hmm. And it's so beautiful that, like, as Eric knows everyone, right? Like, he knows his students. Like, I call him his students because he knows them by name, and I'm not used to that where, like, principal will know children and know you when you call. You're like, "Hey," because everyone knows your name, right? You're just someone's mom, and he's like, "Hey, Davine," yeah, right? And so, welcome, and let's connect. And I'm gonna learn so much from you too.
Well, I want to tell you that "Hey, girl" is like endearment, and this is the other thing, right? If I say "Hey, girl," it's
It
like,
depends on who it's coming from.
"Hey, girl," right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
again, like, I know that he didn't mean like boy,
Right.
like boy, right? But it's just like how we process language, and it's so bizarre. But to his point, it makes or breaks the authentic bond in 2.5 seconds. Like, wait, what? You know what I mean? So I would give some grace to the person. I think they like, "Hey, girl." It was like, "Hey, girl." You don't feel it because you feel it was professional. See,
Yeah.
and that's how I felt
Yes.
about the sass. Like, you're sassing me. It's like, it just sounds like a slave movie. So,
Thought I saw, I don't know if you had a hand in the back.
I did, yeah. Can you, to back on the track topic, so I think, yes, absolutely the goal of everyone with the higher level is, no one would argue that. My question is, what sort of empirical models or examples of this being done successfully exist, if any? Because we talked a little bit about us being, I guess, pioneers in doing some of this. And specifically, how are we thinking about, to the extent this is an experiment, a noble social experiment, but an experiment, how are we thinking of, where we will be in 4 years? Because these things that happen at the high school level, which it sounds like aren't changing, our students are coming, in collision with national standards. When it comes time to talking about AP classes and things like that, and that impacts them later on as well.
So a couple things, and if I misunderstand or don't answer a question directly, let me know. First of all, in terms of coming into collision with national standards, that is true for all the courses that our students take, that there are standards that they have to meet. That is true for all of our math courses, for example, that students are taking here at Woodbury and beyond. So there are standards that we are making sure and working to help our students be proficient in. Like I said, what our goal is in terms of making sure we see students who are prepared for those advanced course pathways and really have the option to choose which pathways they want to go in instead of that being predetermined for them at very young ages. There is data that we're able to look at on a regular basis. We looked, for example, at recently our students took the MAP assessment. So we're monitoring on a regular basis, and we know that it is going to take time for us to have to really be able to draw more firm conclusions about where success is, where things we need to grow in. In terms of other empirical models, there are other districts that have done this kind of work. And of course, every district has its own unique characteristics. We're fortunate to be a part of a couple of nationwide networks with other districts that both have similar compositions as us and are also doing some of this work. A district that is often cited is Evanston, Illinois. They have done some of this detracking work and de-leveling work at different grade levels. There are other districts. Chicago has done some other work. I was just in a call recently with Wade County Public Schools, I think in North Carolina. And there are institutions of higher education that are also providing guidance around this. Stanford, USC are two institutions that have really helped take a lead in this work. And there are others. We're not the only ones doing this. And there are lots of books that exist around detracking and how to help create successful integrated learning modules. So we do have some empirical work that's been done that identifies successes and challenges that we should keep in mind. Again, though, I would say my only caution in all of that is there are districts that have done this. Every district is a little bit unique in both how they approach this and different circumstances around this, but we are certainly learning from people who have come before us, and people are doing this now.
And just one quick follow-on.
Sure.
Is there anything that's sort of like a control in this experiment in the sense of an area, a district that has detracked where they don't have the racial diversity that we have, where they've simply gone to detracking because they actually think it's going to positively impact the academic outcomes for everyone?
I'd have to look at that question in a little more depth. Often when we talk about districts who don't have racial diversity and detract, we're talking about majority districts with students of color, like vast majority districts, Chicago comes to mind as having done some of that work, but I have to look into it a little more. So, Chris.
Just another word on detracking. I don't, as a parent, I did not see this as an experiment whatsoever. I personally think it's the right thing to do, so I applaud the district in taking that step. I know it was difficult because it was during the pandemic and there was a lot of shakeup, but I truly believe it was the right thing to do. And there is data and a lot of research that backs that up. And so I would point anyone who's interested for 30 minutes, listen to the podcast called Teaching While White. It's episode 24. It's on detracking. It's from an incredible scholar out of the University of Denver. And he explains it in a way that I cannot. But I've even seen this in my own family. My daughter was tracked. My oldest daughter was tracked and was far behind by the time she got to high school. She is now an IB diploma student, but had to catch up dramatically in math because she was tracked in third grade. But that's beside the point. It is the right thing to do for all of the reasons I think that you have mentioned. So it's a great podcast.
Thank you for highlighting that resource. I would agree. It's one of the most succinct, well-articulated descriptions of the work that is out there.
Dr. Glasner, could you say it for the camera, just in case it doesn't?
Episode 24 of the Teaching While White podcast.
Super good.
So I just had a question about the math. I know you talked about leveling up, which is great. However, if there is supports in place for those students that are being leveled up that are not ready to be leveled up. So I wanted to know what supports. I know you said the program had built-in supports, but I struggle as a parent to see what those supports are. So if you could talk about some of those supports and also if there's gonna be tutoring brought back to the schools for academics, because there's like music, tutoring after school and other things after school, but nothing for academics for sixth graders.
So in terms of supports in the classroom, we do have, it's really around instructional strategies, making sure that there are opportunities for the teacher and often, in many cases, teachers in the classroom to work individually with students or in small groups. For students who need much more intensive supports, we try to double up math, particularly at the middle school where they'll have an opportunity for an additional math class. For those students, those are typically students we identify through the assessments that they take, and students who are really at the kind of the lower quartiles of achievement, to provide them with kind of a double dosage of mathematics at those grade levels. In terms of tutoring, we're working on it. We have a partnership right now with CSU to provide some more intensive tutoring for students. I can't remember off the top of my head, maybe Mr. Foreman does, which grade levels.
Yeah, fifth grade.
Fifth grade, there you go. And we know that intensive high dosage tutoring can have a real impact on students' success in the regular classroom. So that is something that we're looking both to see how the current program goes and whether we can expand it in the future. And I don't know if you had anything else to add on that question.
Yeah, I mean, we just need to, this was the first year in a while we were able to run some after school programming. So we currently have 15 different clubs and whatnot that we're running, including the partnership with CSU. But fully disclosure, I mean, it's 20 students. So in terms of ramping that up over time, I mean, many of you might be familiar with what we used to have was the Woodbury Tutoring Center. So that was district, or it was K6. I think it stopped in 6, but basically was more of it was a homework center. It was the Woodbury Homework Center. I don't want to say it wrong, but the idea of having a place to do homework, to have some adults around to support, to eliminate some of that at home, is something that we, for many reasons, weren't providing during the pandemic, and I think is something that as a district, now that we can provide some additional transportation and things that are kind of ramping up to sort of normal levels, I'd like to see us be able to add it in much greater detail.
I have an idea. Listening to that, do you think you guys could create a relationship with, is it not MyCom, but I just had it. They pay for kids to have employment throughout the year and through summer. And then you can have the kids who are at the advanced level, probably at the high school, teach the kids who are struggling, and they can actually have a job from it. It's not MyCom though.
Sure, it's not MyCom. I thought it is.
It's Youth Opportunities.
Oh, YOU.
YOU.
Yeah.
I think that would be really cool and something innovative that you guys can do, because you're hiring them and then they're teaching them and they learn better from, people who have fast tracked that process with the same curriculum.
Yeah, no, it's something we'll look into. I know we've had opportunities in the past for students to do tutoring, for older students, do tutoring for younger students. It did kind of pause during the pandemic, something we'd like to do more in the future.
I just want to follow up. I just feel like, I know you were saying the middle school, they can double up on math, but that's for the students that's way below. I just feel like those that are not way below, but in the middle or a little bit below the middle, are going to be the ones that's losing out, because they're not high above and they're not way below. So there's nothing for the ones in the middle.
And so in those cases, that's where the in-class supports, making sure, and we've been working, I was just talking with Mr. Foreman about this earlier today, that the kinds of structures we're providing in classes provide every student a chance to get the support and challenge that they need. I'm actually going to just take an example out of earlier grade levels. We know that, for example, in second grade or third grade, if you look at students' reading levels coming into that class, the number of students who are actually defined as being on grade level is usually a very small percentage of the overall number of students in the class. So when we're thinking about early literacy development, we know it's really important for teachers to have individual and small group time with students to really support individual student needs and push students. Those are the kinds of structures we're working on implementing here. I can hear from your question that we're not quite there yet in math, but we know that is something that we're working towards. And I think we've made pretty substantial progress this year, and more to come. Meryl, I know you had your hand up.
Yeah, when the kids have to double up on math in middle school, are they missing out on another class?
Good question. Typically, yes. We have gone back and forth over many years as to which class that should be. Sometimes it's world language, sometimes it can be an elective. It's never a class we want to pull them out of. And so that's why we really try to make sure that it's for students who are really at kind of a very, lower level of whether it's math skills, and because we know how important it's going to be for them to that up. But we try to do it on a limited basis. We also have, and I know Mr. Foreman mentioned this, the after school time, that is sometime we can play with. Because of the pandemic, we pulled back on some of that, and we're looking at ways to see how we can kind of increase that. The high school flex block would be an example of that, where we're trying to use that maybe less traditional time as a time for students who need additional supports or intervention or enrichment in that space. Eric, I see that there is something.
No, it's just asking us if we're still here.
Sorry, I'm slacking on my duties.
Similarly, I was wondering about support. Full disclosure, I teach at the high school, and so, and I teach art, so I'm seeing all kinds of kids. And one of the unfortunate things that I see are the kids who have shut down and have decided that school is not for them, they're not good at it. And so, that's another worry with, I not to say that I'm not for detracking, I love the idea of it, but I am concerned about students feeling like who maybe aren't quite ready yet, like their brains just aren't there yet, but they will be, we know that they will be, and that kids just develop at different rates. And I don't think that it's right to hold them back, because then, like Catherine, it's harder for them to get caught up later on, but just ensuring that there are enough supports so that they don't feel like they just don't get it, and so they're not smart, and so they shouldn't try.
I would echo that. I think the more we can do to help drive resources into the classroom, is what I'm seeing in the difference of fifth grade now versus 4 years ago is teachers who are feeling like they have a huge spectrum to cover in one classroom and really struggling. I mean, having good curriculum tools, but struggling to have the time to really spend with each kid on the low end, in the middle, on the high end. It is a real struggle. And I think whatever we can do to help drive people into the classroom aides, push-ins, whatever we can come up with. I know that's expensive, but if we're serious about this de-leveling or detracking, I think that's the kind of expense we're going to have to go to in order to really make it work, because the pacing, I have a kid who happens to be gifted. And so he's, experiencing math in a way where he's sitting for the classroom lesson, he goes straight to that hardest worksheet, and then he sits for half the class on Khan Academy. That is not differentiation. That is very frustrating for me as a parent, because I'm sitting here saying, this is not challenging for him. I mean, he's just kind of clicking around, probably coding half the class instead of really being on Khan Academy. So, I mean, which is fine in a certain degree, but, we're talking about different levels of kids, and they're all sitting in the same class, and that's a really great thing. And I also support the de-leveling and the detracking, but I think, with his son at the high school, he's also an advanced student, but I think what's interesting is the use of the after-school time conferences and the flex time. I think that's something that district-wide could be a really powerful tool for a lot of kids for a lot of different reasons, right? So he's a bright kid. He's a 9 honors math. He loves the pacing of it, but there are certain concepts he was struggling with, so he just go for conferences, right? And that's a wonderful resource that we would be struggling at home to even help him with any of that. So it's great he can sit with his teacher and have that time.
Thank you for bringing both of those points up. We agree, and we're trying to continue to ramp up as many supports as possible. You're right, it is expensive. We're fortunate in Shaker that our community and our board has been willing to put resources towards these efforts, and thinking about ways that we can use that time after school, in some cases before school, to support students who need extra support, whatever that looks like.
Austin, you mentioned clustering gifted students together. How are gifted students identified?
We administer a series of assessments, and MAP assessment is one of them, Naglieri assessment is one of them, and if I'm missing one, let me know. Torrance assessment is one of them, at specific grade levels. In order to be identified as gifted, you have to meet a certain benchmark or threshold. We have tried our best to identify assessments that are to the extent possible, inclusive and non-biased, and try to really identify giftedness across as wide a range of spectrum as possible. Like I said before, we know that here in Woodbury, for example, about a third of students are identified as gifted. But we do have very specific assessments that we use at specific times. Eric, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add.
Yeah, I mean, so the state sort of sets some of those benchmarks. So, for example, like in second grade and fifth grade, you have to do a universal screener. So our universal screener is MAP, and students qualify as gifted if they score on the 95th percentile or higher at any point on MAP from second grade on. And then we have students who score in like a next range, like our data department will send those. We actually have students doing that this week at Woodbury, are offered a secondary screener. And off of that secondary screener, that will pare down that number. And then some students at that point are offered a third screener, which families can opt in or out of at that point. I think one of the things that's valuable to say as well is like once you are qualified as gifted, no matter the grade, you are gifted until you graduate. So there is a level of, any assessment, right, over time can have a multitude of outcomes. And so, learning isn't linear, right? So there may be dips and valleys and other things in like all of children's development. So by and large, you get to, we undoubtedly have a community of committed families, like highly, we have some incredible students in this building and in all of our buildings. I think the number of, having over 200 students in this building that are identified as gifted by the state of Ohio is incredible. And also, I mean, that's a lot. And so I think, the difference between, especially at young ages, what does it mean to score well on some standardized tests has just a bit to do with the environment and the literacy richness of the world around you than it does particular aptitude. And I think as a district, and one of the things that Beth Wilson-Fish, who's our gifted coordinator, is working with us on now is how do we make sure that we're who traditional standardized testing is not going to be the measure where they are going to be identified, and look for other avenues that we're increasing that number across the board.
Can I ask a quick question to that point? So when I think of gifted, I actually think of like your exceptionally smart kids. A third of the school feels like a lot. Is there?
We have a lot of exceptionally smart kids in Chicago.
Like where's the New York Times articles promoting that? What is an is there an average in the state of gifted?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I live and work here, so my whole life is within like a 4-mile radius. But no, I would say what I think is an important delineation is the idea of like understanding and academic achievement and aptitude, right? And there are lots of ways in the state of Ohio that you can be identified as gifted. Some of those are related to, core academic skills, and some of them are really, there's creative thinking and other ways in which the state identifies, but also that people's brains work. And I think often, when we talk about that, like when we've been talking a lot at Woodbury, I have a chat, like while we have gifted clusters in every classroom, for me, the conversation is on content that has been mastered or content that we are working on versus gifted students versus non-gifted students. Because on particular content, you may have a student who's identified as gifted who's still working on that standard, or a student who is not identified as gifted who has mastered that standard. And at that point, we need to be providing instruction that matches where they are, whether or not they have that identification. And I think when you identify, that becomes labels in which we stratify. And I think what we're hoping to do here over time is whether it's a student with an IEP or a student who's been identified as gifted, we're looking at where they are with the standards that they're on right now. And, Dr. Glasner has touched on this a lot. I think the conversations that we're having now at Woodbury in the middle school, and they were similar conversations that we were having at Onaway when I was there, is how do we build a classroom that allows for that to happen? And many of us, particularly in mathematics, went to classrooms where there was a teacher in the front of the room and the teacher taught the content, and then we did the work, and then we turned in the work, and then we did 1 to 40 odd for homework, and then we went back the next day and we did the same thing again, right? our classrooms have to look far more dynamic than that, right? And for some of our teachers, that, you know, we're getting, you know, that takes time, and that's where the interventions, the gifted intervention specialists come in, the work of our instructional coach, and shifting the way we look at the way our curriculum looks and feels in the classroom. And I think that we're working toward that. I think, like anything, there are days when I feel like I see examples that are absolutely where we want them to be, and other days when, you know, there are clearly signs of things that we need to continue to discuss and work on as a school.
I think having your son teach a class probably would be great. It would
See,
give him
you'd
the-
be horrible at it, but I think what's interesting to me, and I don't really think of it as like gifted, like there's somehow this set apart, like more capable, you know, human beings. I think it's another piece of neurodiversity. And so what Eric's talking about really strikes home with me, because I think what we're really looking at, you know, gifted doesn't mean gifted at everything. Gifted comes in all kinds of shapes and sizes, and I think that you know, when you're really meeting the child where they are versus going lockstep and then expecting, you know, kids to follow some sort of pattern consistently over time, it's not going to happen. You know, it's going to depend on if your school's set on fire and you've been moved around for 3 years in a row, like the Fernway kids were. Or if you know, I mean, like there's all kinds of life circumstances that are going to present for a kid, if it's at home, at school, wherever, that are going to make them more capable of learning in any given day. Right. And then there's just different types of brains and how they work. And so I have such respect for the classroom teachers and what they have to try to achieve in getting kids on the same page, even trying to get them to the same point at any point in time is a huge, huge task. So I think whatever we can do as PTO, as parents, to support that classroom environment and encourage the district to put resources to making sure that every kid is met where they are, no matter where they are, so that we can all have, I mean, what we want is productive human beings coming out of all of this, right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't really care about much else. I just want to make sure that, you know, we're not making kids feel like they don't belong in school or that they aren't learners because of struggles that they're having.
Just to build on that, it isn't as much about, okay, at what age are you doing algebra, right? It's about no matter where you are there, like, are you being met where you are, but are you also being taught to handle challenges where you are too? And that's one of the questions I have as we talk about folks and the big challenge of our educators and kind of appealing to where kids are in a broad range of abilities in the classroom. How do we make sure that, you know, the kids that maybe are getting to that master point earlier in the time, that they're being challenged and they're not being kind of turned loose? And it's, I don't envy the teachers having to figure out how do I, you know, take this amount of time and spread it across this range. So I just wanted to build on that. It's not always about like, yes, let's feel accomplished that we're getting everyone here, but let's make sure that, because I wonder a little bit about leading and lagging measures of success and would love more clarity about that over time to understand math is probably lagging to some extent, although we're doing it with some regularity. How do we make sure that there are kids not sitting in that classroom that are bored, that are losing their love of learning? How do we, on some end of it, and then other kids that are feeling overwhelmed and losing their love of learning? Like I think that's what we all want to protect, right? Like that ability, that inner ability to stay challenging yourself versus master this or that.
Yeah, that makes me think just of a couple of things. First of all, those same challenges that you described existed in track settings as well. And, you know, and we know that there were gaps in how we were challenging students, how we were engaging learners, all those things. I think we're fortunate here in Shaker Heights to be an IB district. And so the idea, and I've heard both of you talk about this, what do we really want our students to leave Shaker Heights with? We want them to be good problem solvers. We want them to be able to persist through challenges, those kinds of things. That is what the IB framework and philosophy is really all about. It's why IB and equity are so closely intertwined. We've spent most of our time this evening talking about kind of the traditional core subjects. In an IB education, we also know our students have access to a more well-rounded education. It's why we've built up programs here like the design program, the innovation space, which is just around the corner from here, music, arts, all of those things where students get to really do some of that hands-on work. Things like exhibition in 4th grade, community project in 8th grade, those are also opportunities where students are applying these skills that are part of the academic core curriculum, but also places where they can kind of expand on it. So I know it's 8:30. I don't want to cut off the conversation. Amber, definitely get to you. I just want to acknowledge, and I appreciate everybody staying this long. I don't know how PTO meetings usually, how long
We
they
last
usually go.
until 8.
All right. So maybe a couple questions if there are, and I'm happy to stick around afterwards or follow up folks afterwards if there are other questions.
I was just briefly gonna expand on what Meryl was speaking to and what you're speaking to about the IB and having well-rounded and these opportunities for art design. I'm just wondering if it's on the district's radar to consider this double dipping not double dipping, I'm sorry, doubling up on math in the middle school. I have a colleague whose daughter was affected by that. This colleague's daughter is able to pay for private tutoring so that she doesn't have to double up on math, so that she can take a foreign language. I don't think that that's equitable. And I would hate to see a choice between foreign language and being in having needs met for math. And then also some of the stories from the high school, perhaps of having to make choices between math or art. I think that's at the high school, maybe the middle school. I'm just wondering if those things are on our radar. I think it's great that we have design. I know we're trying to put in a lot of options for our kids. I think that's spectacular. I think it's great that we have the IB curriculum. But I'm just wondering if those are problems we're trying to.
Those are on our radar, and for those of you who have experienced different iterations of master schedules, which probably includes most of you in this room, I apologize, and that's why. Because we're trying to get the balance right between offering a wide range of options for students, offering opportunities for supports for students, while also having classes that are long enough to be able to do, meaningful and intensive work. It's a balance we're still trying to negotiate and achieve. I mean, the example of the math workshop at the middle school, I know we've been working on that for years, trying to figure out where this fits into a student schedule. It's still something I expect to see movement on over the next couple of years. Flex block at the high school is where we're trying to experiment there, and I imagine we're going to keep looking at master schedules, try to get it more balanced down the road at other levels also.
You generally shouldn't have to choose between math and art at the high school, though.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah, that one I haven't heard before.
I'm sorry, music and art.
Yeah, part of that is just there's so many extracurriculars or like other classes outside of core that students just get overwhelmed.
I'm happy
too
to
many
talk
things
about
on their
offline.
plate.
I have a 10th grader right now who is an artist and well, a musical artist and medium artist, and we're going through scheduling right now, so I can talk all about that process.
Yeah. I just hope that there's conversations for more than just me being here at the PTO meeting, right? That there are families that I know are navigating this. Like I have another colleague whose daughter is doing dance outside of school so that she can get her PE credit so that she can do all of the extracurriculars she wants to at the high school. Sorry.
Just a plug too, on that front, like we're trying to work really strategically. My first year with a lot of support from Mr. Sheed and Ms. Thomas in terms of kids transitioning from 6th to 7th grade, because there are some choices kids need to make at that point, and wanting families to really have a clear sense of what do those mean for the next 2 years, but then if they have any connection to the choices they can make at the high school. Those are questions that I don't feel comfortable having the information to answer right now, but wanting our 6th grade families to have that information well prior to making those choices. So that's something we're actively working on with the middle school and wanting to make sure that we're not doing those things just here at Woodbury, but that we're involving families in understanding what's going on with them.
I'm so sorry, but I actually have a question about long-term facilities. This was a academic heavy conversation, which is great. But you do have something you want to put to voters in the fall. So I just have a question, if we could go back to that. So if this becomes the middle school space, I'm just thinking about the athletic department, which doesn't get quite as much attention as our academics, but could you kind of fill us in on where the athletic field would be and how that would work?
Thank you very much for asking that question. Our goal is and our plan is that we look at the current middle school site as a place where we hope to be able to, we currently have athletic sites there. We would maintain those. We're working with the city. I'm looking at if we can expand it into more of like an athletic and recreation facility. That'd be fantastic. Possibly with outdoor spaces, possibly with indoor spaces. I know bathrooms keeps coming up as something we better make sure we have there. We still have a lot of planning to do between here and there, and it's not clear yet if we have fields and other athletic amenities available at the middle school site. who would use that. It might be middle school students, it might be some of our high school students, it depends on which facilities and which teams. So that's something that we're looking at, but our hope is that that site would be able to remain a place where we can continue to use sports and athletic facilities there. We also know there's probably some sharing that we could do closer to home in this area, but I also know that developing the athletic schedule is already a monumental task, just with the teams that we currently have operating on this site, and we know that that'll continue to be a challenge moving forward, so we want to make sure we have that site available for the future.
And so would that be a separate plan than the facilities plan?
Good question. Probably be part of it. We're working on figuring out what exactly the board needs to vote on for the state rules by the end of May. It's not entirely clear that athletic facilities, the middle school site, would need to be a part of that vote, but it's not to say that won't be part of the plan, just part of it. That's not part of the vote the board has to take in order to send the plan to the state. So it's something that we're working on. And when I mentioned that we have additional board meetings coming up over the next couple of months to continue to work out details, that's an example of one of the details we're still working on.
Real quick, just to make sure I'm understanding this. So the middle school will no longer be used at all. This will be the middle school. So pretty much you're going to your neighborhood, elementary school, and then coming to this campus for everything
6
else.
to 12, that's correct.
So what are you gonna do with the building?
The middle school building,
Is it gonna be demolished?
we're still working on it, but I would imagine first it's gonna be swing space. As we renovate buildings or build new buildings, we'll need a place for students. We then would likely demolish some or all of it. It partly depends on whether there will be recreation facilities, could the auditorium be used, that kind of thing. So we're not yet sure exactly whether we level the whole building or most of the building, but those are things that we'll be figuring out.
Okay.
I'm glad Brooke brought up the athletics. I think what's interesting to me is that we're going to bring 6 through 12 to the oval, essentially, right? But all our athletics fields could potentially be on a whole other site. The logistics of that seem backwards to me. So if we could come up with designs that maybe also contemplate as much of the athletics facilities here, I think, as a person who is constantly shuttling children all over Shaker Heights, I can't imagine, we've got a busing issue already. Are we gonna bus kids? So it just
So that is
feels like
something
we're
we're
creating
working
more
on.
issues than we're solving. when we're
As a
thinking
resident
about
of the administration building nearby, we expect that will likely be moved to be able to accommodate
that. Sure.
parking, potentially other green space, athletic spaces, that kind of stuff. So that's
Right.
something that we are working on.
So just.
Thank you for throwing that out there. I want to thank everybody for coming. I really appreciate your time this evening. Like I said, I'm happy to stick around. Thank you, Brooke. Thank you, Sarah. Thank the rest of the PTO officers for helping make this happen. Appreciate it.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Glasner, for being here. Thank you to Heather Weingart for being here with the board. Thank you to Eric Foreman for being principal. Thanks for everybody who came and watched online. Oh, whatever I said. Okay, anyways, bye, guys. Great. Thank you. That was a